Shit's Gone Sideways.
All right, we are back with another episode of Shit's Gone Sideways. Welcome, Brandon Martignago. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for coming on the show. We have been friends for many years, as previously being introduced by mutual friends. You own a bar in King's Cross named Dulcie's. You're the president still of the Potts Point Partnership.
The business chamber. Yeah. That's why I'm expecting a call from the Lord Mayor. I'm kind of.
All right, so we may have to pause at some point because he's got a call from the mayor. What a big dog in town. He's also something of a, what do we call you on social media? A gay icon, a bi icon, a bicon?
A bicon. Yeah, just a dude who takes his shirt off and takes photos of it, really. That's all I am.
A thirst trap king?
Trash. Worthless. Because I did nothing with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a few followers on Instagram.
Yeah, cool. So, look, with the previous episodes of this so far, I've got people to fill out a questionnaire on telling me a story of like how shit went sideways in their life.
And I fucked it.
And you haven't done that for today. So we're going to, this is a good test for me. We're going to improvise. Usually I have a whole page of questions here and I plan it out. But today you're just going to tell me a time when your life went sideways and we're going to just explore that. So where are we going? Tell me a story.
So I obviously maybe. I like dating boys. And I remember this one time where I had a gentleman caller come over to the house and I opened the door. And from that moment on, we kind of had this really intense connection. He was from Perth. He was Christian. He was closeted.
How did you connect with this guy? Grindr?
Yeah, the yellow Facebook, Grindr.
Yeah.
And then that's probably lesser part of the story. More this is setting up the essential shit's gone sideways moment.
Of course.
And this is just context.
Yeah.
And then we had this very weird relationship for about a year where he would kind of tell his family he was coming over here for business. He'd come here and live his best little partnered gay life.
How old was this dude?
I was about 22.
Yeah.
And he would have been about 25, 26.
Okay. Yeah.
So, look, we're all discovering our own kind of pathways at this stage.
Yeah.
Actually, you feature in this story.
Do I?
And I, yeah.
A gay sauna.
yeah.
I forgot about that.
It was Andrew. Andrew was the guy in at the door. No.
So can we give this guy a fake name just so for the narrative?
Yeah, let's call him. Oh fuck! I feel like every generic name I've dated, so someone's gonna feel it's about that. Felix. I've never dated a Felix. All right, so Felix, for the point of this, was closeted, lived in Perth, was quite prominent in Perth, I think, because there's about 40 of people. So he came over to Sydney quite a lot in order to live this life that he'd been denied over there. He was part of a surf life club there, and so he felt like there was a lot of pressure, not only from his religious family, and he was quite religious. He went to church every Sunday. He was part of I think they had worship. I'm not a religious person. I don't get it. Or not that I don't get it. I don't get how it's a community. I think they do things throughout the week as well as Sunday.
Must have been a head fuck for him though to be super religious and also
a cocksucker.
Yeah.
And anal. Yeah. Sodomy is definitely not a part of the Bible.
You put it more abruptly than I would have said, but yeah. Let's go with it.
They actually hate sodomy. But essentially one of the parts that he really struggled with was it is a very conservative world in Perth, and that reality of coming out. He was quite closeted, still did all those things that closeted people do, go to beats and things like that, and try and hook up with boys on the side quite quietly. And then
go to beats?
Yeah.
What's a beat?
A beat is basically just like a place, it's usually a toilet or a bit of park, somewhere where men can go to hook up with people that isn't like a house or Grindr or a sauna. It's a very discreet, primal. You go in, you jerk off at the urinal. I'm sure you've been in a beat and you've not known it because there's a lot everywhere. There's
How do you find out where they are? Is there an app?
There's a website called squirt.com, squirt.org, I think it is. But anyway, can we get
Sorry, I have so many questions.
Yeah, we can talk about beats at one stage. I'd love to fill you in, show you. We'd give you a tour. We could do a beat tour. And then we kind of saw each other for a while. It was really nice. He was great. It was probably the first time I started falling in love with someone. And then there was always going to be difficulties with the reality. He started looking at the idea of moving to Sydney. And then it all kind of like stopped a little bit. I think he had a bit of a freak out. I think one of his friends moved to Sydney and saw us in Bondi together.
Oh, fuck. So it was like a colliding of worlds.
Yeah, like sliding doors, Gwyneth Paltrow moment. All of that kind of freaked him out. And so he kind of went on the down low a bit more and kind of retreated. And then it was at this stage where a friend of mine was also having issues with her family. And we both had this moment where we're like, fuck it, it's Christmas coming. We're going to like fuck the world and we're going to go on a trip. And we decided to... she was like, let's go to Cuba and I want to go visit my friends in Zihuatanejo in Mexico, which is from the Shawshank Redemption. That's where he goes at the end of the thing.
Yeah.
So we decided to go there. It's actually a really cute little town.
Yeah.
And then she was like, I know Cuban aristocracy, which was the first red flag.
Did you see Andy Dufresne there?
Yeah, of course. He's still there.
Working on boats?
Yeah. And with like a nice little rock wall.
Yeah,
It's definitely not like that. It's like, it's family Mexico.
Yeah.
Anyway, she's like, I know Cuban aristocracy. We're going to sail on that yacht into Cuba. And I was like, that's not real. I'd said to her, I'll come and join you. I'm going through a bit of something at the moment. I don't know if I need to get my head around dating Felix and what that means. And she was like, yeah, sweet. And I was like, I'll only come if we can do acid at Disneyland on Christmas Day.
Yeah. That sounds like a vibe.
Look, it is, and you dream about it, and we like it's a side note. It is a fucking great time.
Yeah.
Disneyland on Christmas Day, though, I always thought that would be a quiet day. It is their busiest day of the year.
Wow.
It is. So we did acid and mushrooms. Somehow we got them into the country. Maybe like how much can you say? Like fuck yeah, we smuggled them into the country, and. We arrived 6 a.m. We went to Disneyland. We dropped a mushroom cap and then we ended up sitting there. We were on Tom Sawyer Island and we just like chatted and like had this incredible moment where the sun was shining. Like perfect mushroom trip. You're in like the most magical place on earth, sitting on a really fake island that's supposed to remind you of like Tom Sawyer. And you're like coming up on mushrooms and you're like, this is like the shit. And then all of a sudden you find yourself losing Beck and I'm running through, if you've ever been to Tom Sawyer Island, it's built up to be like a children's exploration island. So this isn't where shit goes sideways, by the way. This is still context.
This is just a small blip.
Yeah,
right?
this is a blip.
Yeah.
My friend goes to the bathroom. I find myself just sitting there like vibing. And then I feel like because of drugs. An hour has passed. So I'm like, fuck, I should go find my friend. So I go looking and my friend at the time was a primary school teacher and is very good with children. And at this stage, I'm calling out her name and this child looks at me and goes, oh, in here, and like beckons me over. Okay. still not where it goes sideways.
And you're tripping on drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck.
And we're on an island in Disneyland where the whole island is built around a series of tunnels that are meant for children to like crawl through and stuff.
Are you sure it was a kid and not like a little Oompa Loompa or a leprechaun?
So I follow this child into the small mountain tunnels.
Yeah.
And the tunnels go on forever. And they're very dark. So every now and then, just to make sure that I'm still following this child, I reach out to like just brush his back to see if he's still there.
Yeah.
In my head, I'm like, he's real. So of course. Anyway, we're traveling through what seems to be an entire ant mine of child tunnels. Children are rushing past in the only way you can in a confined space. There's like every now and then there's like little glow mushrooms, which I vibe. And then like there's a point where I'm like, we must be in the heart of Anaheim
We've
by
been
now.
walking for hours.
Yeah, for hours. And like following this child. And there's this point where I just go, where is she?
Going?
And this kid, there's a moment where the light from somewhere hits his face as he turns around and he's like, "Who are you?" And I realize at that point, I'm like, I've just followed a child into a mountain in Disneyland. That's a very dark mountain. I've stroked his back a couple of times thinking he's leading me to my friend.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's
but
believable.
But it's a very problematic scenario.
Yeah, and it's very believable that she probably found a community of children and, like, he was leading me to her. Anyway, I quickly got out. I found her, and we had this amazing trip. That's
Wait, so this kid has offered to lead you?
No. This kid
never
beckoned.
You were just high and following a child.
I just followed a child into a mountain.
All right. Okay, we got to the bottom of it.
Yeah. And so I like discovered that was probably. That really set the standard for Disneyland on hallucinogenics and psychedelics, and it was amazing. I had a great time. We did a whole heap of things. There was a point where we were in line for Space Mountain, and we were in line for 2 hours, and we were talking some of the most hectic shit that you could possibly talk about. And after a while, you realize that there's families around you who are listening to stories of like suicide and brain like.
And then I stabbed him.
Yeah, like you're really sharing some stories about like youth and friends and things like that. And yeah, so that was
you start seeing parents covering their kids' ears, and you're like,
100%.
Okay,
that's the trigger where you go,
okay,
drug chat in line at Disneyland is not ideal. Anyway, that really sets up the idea of our trip. And the friend that I went with is kind of like a yes. She's like a yes and person. So everything we did was like a yes and what's more.
Yeah.
So we went to Cuba. We went to Mexico City. We came back from Cuba. At that stage, the embargo had just been lifted. So after about 2 weeks of going around, we hadn't had drugs, and she loved drugs. So she was like, I really need cocaine. And at this stage, we're coming back from Cuba. We were in Miami. And she's like, I really need cocaine. I want to have a big night on cocaine. And I was like, okay, cool. Take a breath. Can I admit that? Yeah. Have you admitted that? Yeah. Look, yeah. So I was tasked with finding drugs. I went on to Grindr.
I went to prison for being a large commercial drug supplier. What? So yeah. I don't know if you know this.
Oh my. I didn't know that I was associated.
Believed it.
With it's actually been quite difficult for me because I now have no connection. I'm how long have you been in? I'm a year sober.
Yeah. Wow. I'm sorry. The police never think about the impact on the wider community.
The community impact is like Mardi Gras coming. And look, we came back. I was tasked with finding cocaine via Grindr, which I feel like Grindr, if you're straight and listening to this and you can't find drugs, you download Grindr, take a shirtless selfie, and you'll get anything you want. It is the Charlie Chocolate. It's Willy Wonka's chocolate factory of options if you can get over the idea that you might have to sell your body. And we found this guy who was like, yeah, for sure. And so we somehow befriended him. He gave us some drugs. But he was like, I want to take you to breakfast tomorrow. And I was like, it's our last day. We're about to drive to Orlando the next day. Anyway, long story short, we went to breakfast the next day. We ended up having a huge, like, sweet party at Soho Beach House in Miami, which then led to like a night of even more cocaine. I fell asleep because I was like, fuck this. Like, this is a lot. And my friend and this guy stayed up and ended up talking about the most hectic things. There was some vague connection with Sydney. This guy had like some really intensive family drama. His sister had had cancer. Her head had like impacted, and he was showing my friend all these photos, and they were just doing cocaine.
That's the last thing I'd want to be talking about on a bender.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's depressing shit.
Absolutely. And so for the rest of the trip, my friend was not quite the same and was like, whoa. But this guy, before we left, broke her. And by the end of this time with this guy, he was like, look, if you ever want to come back to Miami, let me know. Key point in the story. So we go to Florida, we go to Orlando, we have a cute time, and then my friend is like, look, let's go to Jamaica next. And I'm at the point of the trip where we've gone through that hectic part of the story with old mate. She's a little bit broken. We've spent a lot of time together. We've done a lot of things, and it has been like, it's been a very long trip. Like we went from LA, Mexico, Mexico City, Cuba to Cayman Islands to Miami to Orlando, and then at Orlando I was like, I can't do this anymore.
It doesn't sound like an R&R trip.
Definitely not. Unless you're
like,
Vietnam R&R, where you were like going and partying and fucking and doing everything.
It sounds like you need a holiday after the holiday.
Correct. So I was like, look, maybe, and we were discussing it, and she was kind of like dying over, and I got a message from Felix who was like, hey, and this is also, I think we've just had New Year's. So we had New Year's in Zihuatanejo. So it must have been like early January by this time. And he's like, hey, sorry I wasn't in Sydney for New Year's and I've been really silent. I'd like to see you when I get back from America. And I was like, well, funny enough, I'm in America. And he was like, where are you? I'm in Vegas. And I was like, well, I'm in Orlando and I'm just about to go back. And he's like, why don't we meet in LA and have like a bit of a chat? And I was like, you know what? And then I was like, let's do it. So I buckled and went and visited him. We had a really amazing weekend. We were able to chat. We went to California Adventure because I couldn't go back to Disneyland.
So your holiday buddy, the teacher,
she went to Jamaica and ended up having like.
And she was cool to part ways at that point?
I think we both were. Yeah. We were like, look, she wanted to go to Jamaica. She wanted to keep the party going. And I was like, I just need to get home. So I went and met up with Felix and had a cute little time. And he was like, look, I think I've worked out what I want. I want to move to Sydney. I want to be with you. I want to do this properly. And I was like, great. I go back to Sydney. He starts making firmer plans to come to Sydney. Gets more and more intensive. He's trying to get a job. At the time, there wasn't really any jobs. So he's like taking other positions. He got a job. He got a house. He got a whole heap of stuff.
But you must have been quite happy at this point because
absolutely. Like this was everything I wanted.
Yeah.
I was genuinely in love with him. We were talking about like getting married and kids, like that whole like proper like
full future.
Yeah. We'd been by this stage it's like almost 2 years of like intensive feelings, protracted. He's back and we have another maybe 6 months of like very intense relationship, moving, going through all those emotions. His family had interventions with him. So he'd come out, told them about me. They were like, that's so great. And then they were like, we're all going to go out to dinner together. And so he would, there was one night where apparently they took his keys and the whole church group and parents and friends sat him down and basically told him that being gay would not only ruin his soul, but ruin his body. Which I find is a new argument. I'm like, it's a new argument, but not a wrong argument. Like,
I mean, there's plenty of ways to do both of those.
Yeah,
though,
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, totally. Well, with like new things like pegging and stuff, everyone's doing something.
There's only about 20 comedians in Sydney doing pegging jokes at the moment. So, yes.
And probably only 2 of them actually pegging. So, like, start talking about things you know, guys. I bet they're doing more fucked up shit. Like, joke about that. We're ready for more.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we have this really intensive time. We get everything. I'm kind of like, my whole thought process is like, yeah, fuck it. We're gonna move in together and have this huge relationship. And he's meeting my friends. I'm meeting his friends here. Like, there's a lot of emotion when someone comes out. And comes out not necessarily for you, but you are the vessel that brings them out. And I think that like really is not only big for the person coming out, it's very big for the person that is the linchpin in that.
What does that look like as a process coming out? Is it a postcard? Is it an Instagram post? Is it just contacting all your friends? Like what do people...
Look, it changes for everyone. Like for some people, it's like full blown, like you can go full pink period and all of a sudden you're going to do a Lipa concert and wearing nothing but glitter. And a thong. Like that's how you did it.
Yeah.
So.
You saw that post, did you?
Yeah. You did the post and the glitter and the Dua Lipa.
Hashtag brave.
Hashtag I stand with me. But essentially, like, and it changes. I think for some people, the background they come from can be completely unlike anything that you or I experienced. They come from families where it's just not possible for them to happily come out. So they have to completely recraft their life. And And they do go through that pink period of like, well, you've arrived in Sydney. The only gay places you know are Stonewall and Oxford Street. So you become part of the Stonewall and Oxford Street clique, and you become that like, I hate the word, but you become that little faggot. I can say it.
Yeah. You're allowed to. I don't think I have my F license.
Not yet. You soon will. But essentially, and it's it's really tough. Like, I think you go through that life, and I've watched it. I've seen friends do it, and you become part of a community instantly. But everyone's kind of standing together alone in that sense. Everyone's just doing what they think they need to do to be gay because they don't have any other understanding of community or belonging or what they're actually there for. It's just this united sense of pop icons and like Long Island iced teas. For others,
well, that sounds quite comforting, right?
Yeah, totally, yeah. Absolutely. Like it is essentially a support group.
Yeah,
you could say, like, it's the exact same equivalent of going to an AA meeting and stuff. You walk in, you go, Hi, I'm Andrew and I'm gay," like that kind of shit. And everyone goes, "Hi, Andrew, let's fuck." And I think that's the really nice thing about the queer community is that it does instantly accept people. My version is completely different. I did a bit of that, but it wasn't really as straightforward and clean as that. Maybe this is where it went sideways. No. And I know for Felix, it was definitely, for him, it was just telling his pre-existing family, which was already quite strong because of the church and the way that they all interacted. The family and the church community were so strong and so present in his life that to get their acceptance was probably the more important thing. It wasn't about like being assimilated into a new community. It was about...
And did he get that?
No.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the issue with a lot of gay people, is like my thoughts were, I didn't want to come out because at the time there wasn't, and you're just trying to make sure you look good on camera. You're like,
do I?
Does this shirt fill out?
I see my tat.
We should take a photo and put it on Grindr for you and see if you get any hits. And then I think for me, it was, at the time, there wasn't really a gay role model or queer person that was visible that I could associate with. There wasn't a version of the queer spectrum that I could go, yeah, I'd happily be associated with that. And that's the main thing that I think a lot of gay people really struggle with, is the perception. Like, we all have friends, we all have like a lifestyle that we are born into, and whether you want to reject that or whether you want to keep that is really dependent on how you come out. One of the things that I find really fascinating is I grew up with a lot of heterosexual men. I worked in hospitality. We would go out. A lot of the places that were open were strip clubs, nightclubs, big old dirty pubs, and so the culture was very like heterosexual and masculine, and I know a lot of people who, although they did not have the F card, or F license, called everyone a faggot, and the culture and the way people talk to was instantly, you made the assumption that being gay or being a faggot or being queer or any of those kind of cocksucker things was wrong. So while you're hanging out with these people and you have these feelings underneath about what it is to be, like, you know inside that there's like, it's like, yeah, maybe I do. Maybe I am a cocksucker.
Like, I certainly think I grew up not being homophobic at all, but me and my group of friends growing up used to use all the homophobic language all the time because it was just funny, right? Yeah. It was just normal. It was just so normalized, to call someone a faggot or, anything, that's so gay, like all that kind of stuff was just so part of your day-to-day language with your mates that you don't really think about, like, just how much you're using those terms.
And I think that's the thing that really fucks with you, is that, like, I've known you for so long, and you are an incredibly great person when it comes to inclusivity for not only different sexual orientations, but races, creeds, religions, all of that. Like, you're very open-minded and like you understand it a lot. I think initially, when you're so scared to admit to people who you are and what you like, you certainly in my version, you project a lot. Like you go, maybe Andrew actually isn't that comfortable with it. Maybe Andrew has this facade of it, and you also don't want to ruin that relationship. You don't want to all of a sudden to be like, yo, I'm gay, and then all of a sudden you don't get invited to shit because everyone's worried that like, oh, he's going to be looking at my dick, or oh, this is going to happen, and you're just like, well, fuck me, man. No, I'm actually not.
So it sounds like a lot of it is just you getting in your own head, though. Is that?
Yeah, but also like you've got to remember, like for me maybe it is, but for others that's a reality. Like all of a sudden you can come out. I remember when Felix, one of the stories Felix told me is that he came out. He was part of a surf lifesaving group, and he told someone at the lifesaving group, and they'd known each other for essentially his whole life. And the minute that he said it, he was like, well, I can't use a change room with you anymore because now you're going to be looking at my dick. And he's like, well, for 25 years I didn't.
Yeah.
So why is it all of a sudden now I'm telling you? And like, that's very real. Like that reality happens.
Yeah. I guess it's still interesting to hear that kind of stuff happening now because like you know that was obviously the very common like back in the day. But these days, I think a lot of us can get into that mindset that we've moved on, like, and it's just not the case.
No. I like you just look at the idea of like we talk about the Sydney metropolitan region being very open-minded and very broad thinking, but it's like we had a marriage equality survey, and there are suburbs less than 10 kilometers away that voted majority against gay people having the same right as straight people.
Yeah. And
like whether it's for cultural, religious, or personal beliefs, it's still terrifying that there are still dudes out there that. And it's I think it's a mix. Like some of the most homophobic people I've ever met are women. And I don't know where it comes from. If it comes from a point of their own homophobia based on perhaps they have queer thoughts, or with women it's rejection that somehow like someone that they thought was attractive is now suddenly gay and isn't going to be able to validate them in a way. Like there's so many reasons why people are homophobic and have these.
A lot of dudes I've met who seem very homophobic.
Love dick.
Seem like they're not in touch with their own sexuality.
Absolutely.
Like that seems to me when I've met dudes, the ones that are like so aggressively homophobic, you're like, dude, I think there's something there that you need to figure out about yourself.
I think you like anal. Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, that's 100% the case. I think there's a really fascinating thing that I learnt recently about the trans community, and the trans community probably is the next social crusade that queer people are having to like go through, because they're only just starting to get the awareness that gay people got. Well, yeah, the gay agenda is kind of essentially over. The reconciliation between straight and gay people and the assimilation and the fact that people like being gay is now commonplace. Transgender people are just going through that, and there is this awareness that they exist and their lifestyle is there. But the thing that blows my mind is that for a lot of transgender people, they're born, and there's some amazing studies about, they did CAT scans of a transgender person's brain, and their brain function is actually of the gender that they believe themselves to be. So if you sit there and like you see a male presenting person who believes that they are female, or who wishes to represent as female and identifies as female, they've done CAT scans where they basically read their synapses and the way that their brain works, and the similarities align more with a woman's brain or a cis woman's brain than a cis man's brain. And I think that that's a really good indication that this is not I chose to be that way. I'm sure there are people who are like, I love the idea of it, and there's a lot of that. But I think for genuine trans people, there is that. And so when you have that, we've gone down a rabbit hole here. But I think when you have that, there is a big push for people to go, you know what, I'm a woman now. They don't like the idea of having a penis. They don't like the idea of using a penis. They are taking hormones that reduce the effectiveness of their penis and a whole heap of this stuff. And we're now at a point where maybe it's the whole queer movement that straight men or straight presenting men are more comfortable to be fucked by a chick with a dick in their ideas because it's still a woman doing it in their eyes. And it kind of, while it's great for trans people to have that visibility and have that like desirability, I still think it's quite fucked up that straight people are saying, well, I obviously want to get fucked, but I'm only going to do it by someone who is female presenting. And I'm going to essentially force those people into this idea of like sexualization. Look, I'm just riffing on my thoughts on it. And I think it's really fascinating that we're now at this junction point where people are picking and choosing parts of sexuality and that benefits them. It's wild.
I mean, my take would be if you're into either a female who has male genitalia or a man with a dick, I mean, either way, I wouldn't classify you as 100% straight.
No,
right?
no, absolutely not. And you're definitely sitting on the Kinsey scale, which I think is great. And the more we realize there is a scale, there is like 100% straight, there's 100% gay, and like there is also a gamut of realities in between. Like, and that's just, I believe, how sexuality exists and is fluid. Like I myself have had sex with women and men and do all that kind of thing. And like, I still feel really comfortable just having a label. I hate when people say I don't like labels, but being pigeonholed into the idea of saying, oh no, well, you're gay or you're bi or you're straight. It like, I genuinely like the idea of like having sex with women and doing that kind of stuff. But often I'll go out and mates will be like, oh, this is Brandy, he's gay. And you're like, instantly you've just like destroyed any opportunity I have to fucking eat some puss, bro.
So, would it be helpful if they just said he's bi or just not say a label at all?
I just don't think any label. It's just like, just go, this is Brandy. Like, I don't know what, I don't walk in and go, hey, this is Hamo.
Yeah.
He's viciously straight. Like, Hamo will.
Unless you get him really drunk, you know.
He will only, look, that's a lie. That is a damaging lie. He will only fuck your vagina.
Yeah.
Like, so in that sense, it
seems bizarre to me that, you'd bring it up at all.
Yeah.
Instead of,
and I think that this is the thing is that like going back to what we really came off topic about was the idea of like not really knowing where you belong or how you can be represented, and that fear of going, fuck. I remember when I was coming out, one of the biggest gay people visible or characters were people like Jack from Will and Grace. It was a very stereotypical idea of what gay people were, and I didn't want to
quite flamboyant.
Yeah. And I did like, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I just didn't feel like that was my vibe. So the idea of like suddenly coming out and friends saying, "Oh my God, you're just like Jack from Will and Grace," I was like, "But I'm not." Like
that would have been frustrating.
Yeah, and that's essentially what you deal with. So for a long time, I was like, "Well, I don't want to come out because I don't want to be pigeonholed and presented like that, or feel like I was some kind of show where people would go, hey, do the Just Jack thing. And you're like, well, fuck, man. Like I can turn it on when I want to. And when I'm with all the fucking homos, I happily like play up to that. But I think someone's sexuality it shouldn't be about showcasing difference. It should just be about who you fuck in the bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's why people have issues when they come out. And that's why Felix and myself probably went through a whole process where it was like, how do I establish myself and say nothing about me has changed? You have just put your own stereotype and prejudice on top of the information I've just told you.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he was in the process of moving down. And then the day that he was supposed to move, I remember exactly where I was. I was standing behind a coffee machine in Double Bay at the job that I was working at the time that I fucking hated. But I was going to make a decision once he moved to Sydney about what I do with work and things like that. And I knew he was supposed to be flying at a certain time from Perth. And I sent him a message, and the message went through on iMessage. And I was like, she's not in the air. And I was like, hey, what's going on? And then I like just had a really sick feeling. And all of a sudden he got a reply that said, hey, I'm not moving to Sydney and I know what that means for us.
Fuck.
And I was like, what
and it was via text message.
Yeah.
That's
and I was like,
brutal.
what the fuck? Like, I was like, bro, we've just gone through like 2 years of some of the most hectic. Granted, that's probably a carnival of red flags. Like, there is a carnival of like things that were wrong. the way that I was like allowed myself to be treated, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but you're too close to it at the time to see it, right?
You're madly in love, and you found someone that you connect with that I wasn't finding anywhere else. And then long story short, I just kind of was like, well, you need to tell me. He also did this thing where he said that he loved me first, and we were like fucking, and he said, I love you too. And I was like, well, I didn't say I love you. And so for about like 6 months, we had this thing. He'd always be like, love you too.
Yeah.
As that would be. And so like, I was like, fuck man. And it took me, after he said, I love you too, it took me maybe another month or so just to trust him enough to be like, I love you. Because he already said the two.
Pretty clever way of saying I love you if you go, sorry.
Yeah, oh my God.
I thought you said it first. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't say it? Oh, I take it back then.
Yeah, I think I just said more. So that, and I basically said to him, I was like, well, you need to tell me that everything, that you don't love me and everything you said was a lie. And he said, everything I said was a lie and I don't love you.
This is still via text.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
And I was like, all right. And I went into like a Sunday lunch service because I was working in a cafe at the moment. I was a manager and my boss was a fucking cunt. Like he was a piece of shit. And everyone knew about the situation. Everyone knew what was going on. I was obviously very affected by it. He'd signed a girl off because she was cheaper. I was there like distraught. And then finally I was like, actually, you know what? Fuck this. And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I walked to my car and I sent a message to old mate from Miami. And I was like, hey, is that offer to be in Miami still up? And he was like, yeah, sure. When do you want to come? And I was like, to be honest, man, I don't have any money, but like I was thinking, and he was like, don't worry, I'll fly you to Miami.
Wow. So, but I mean, look, I'm a simple man, but I think Felix probably owed you a phone call at that stage.
Yeah, Felix is trash.
Like a fucking text message, I'm not coming. And also, like, it just shows you, like, people have spider sense, hey, when something's wrong. Like, you knew it in your gut, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. I get that sometimes. I've had that sometimes as well.
You got it on the day you were arrested. You called me. You were like, hey, I feel like. Yes. We didn't know. But
well, yes.
But we do.
Sometimes we have ESP, I think. But, all right, so Felix has completely been a fuckwit. He's texted you to say that he's not coming to move on with your entire planned future.
So
and you've
basically
gone, fuck it.
My life was like, I have nothing to live for, which is not true. Look, I've gone through bouts of like anxiety and depression, and I've probably had dark thoughts. But at that point in time, I didn't. I wasn't like, actually, not funny story, but humor in it. There was my one time that I've ever thought of trying to kill myself. This is really
better be funny.
This is really
better
dark.
be good.
I decided, I was like, this is it. And I was like in the darkest place, and I walked to the harbour because I was like, I'm gonna drown myself.
Fuck! Of all the options you chose, drowning.
Yeah. I didn't know. And I walked
to swim out to the ocean until you get too far.
Well, I got to Mrs. Macquarie's point. It's also 11 a.m. in the day on a Saturday. There's a fucking yacht race and people are fucking everywhere. And me, super dramatic, is like, I'm going to drown myself in the harbour.
You keep trying to drown yourself. People keep pulling you out.
People are like, hey, mate.
You need some help?
I don't think you can swim.
People keep throwing life rafts at you.
So I walk out, and the harbour's actually not as deep around that point that you expect. And then the realization that you're like, I haven't thought this through. I don't know how I'm going to keep myself under the water because obviously I'm
it's a really bad plan.
Awful.
Yeah.
Awful plan. Awful. And that's all I put it down to is that as you can tell by me not filling in paperwork, I still believe in that because one day it stopped me from killing myself because I didn't think a plan through. But I found myself in ankle deep water looking around on a really nice summer's day in Sydney and just went, maybe another day to plan.
Say what you will about the negatives of ADHD. It also, one of the side effects is that it makes it very difficult to complete tasks. And in this instance, it helped him to fail to complete killing himself.
And so in that sense, I knew that I'd already failed. I'm not going to fail again.
Yeah.
So in this sense, I just there was something that just kicked in where I was like, fuck it. I need to get as far away from Sydney as possible. At the time, I wasn't finding what I wanted here. I knew that Felix was like the only option that I really thought I had. So I was like, I'm out. So I called this dude. He basically said, I'll fly you to Miami. And then that's the point that I was like, great. I have another option and I have a way to get out of here. And yeah. Can we break now so I can do this quick call and then I'll come back?
Yeah. We'll take a short break where you'll get some messages from our sponsors. And welcome back to Shit's Gone Sideways. Sorry, we had to have a short break there while Brandon talked to the Mayor of Sydney.
Yeah.
How did that convo go?
Good. It's it's one of those things. Like you go from doing podcasts about like doing acid mushrooms in Disneyland to
and
talking
following
to
children in the caves,
to talking to the Lord Mayor, about World Pride activities.
What a life, eh?
Yeah, no, it's
So let's get back to the story we're talking about. So Felix had given you the flick rudely via text message, and you were questioning your life and whether you wanted to go on.
I think I just decided that like Sydney was not for me at that time, and so I really decided to pick everything up and leave. And I didn't even do that well. Like I basically said to this guy, hey, if Miami's still an opportunity, I'll come to Miami. And he said yes.
What was the time period between when you'd met the guy and that message?
Probably we'd met him, let's just say January 5th.
Yeah.
And then, January 5th. And then we reconnected again probably May, June.
Okay. So it wasn't that long. It was just a few months.
No. Yeah, it was definitely like everything was still fresh. That's why I was like, oh yeah, I could do this. And going into
wasn't like a weird blast from the past thing. Yeah.
And going into Sydney winter, and he'd sent like in Facebook messages. We'd chatted a couple of times, like really kind of meaningless. Hey, how are you? Yeah, good, man. How are you? Winter's coming. Yeah.
Was it sexual at all?
No.
Yeah.
No sexual. Obviously, at this point, I think I was spending my life with Felix. And then it all kind of came down to the idea that I'm like, okay, cool. Winter's coming. I could get seasonal depression or I could go to Miami. So I decided to go to Miami. And he booked
Sounds like the better of the options.
Yeah. And I was like, my interactions with Miami were, as I said, we'd gone out, we'd partied, we'd had an amazing experience, had the best of Miami. This guy obviously was a bit cashed up. And so I was like, oh shit, Miami can be really fun.
Yeah.
And so 2 weeks later, I think I had my sister was living with me. So she essentially just took over my apartment and I subletted or something. I don't even remember how that happened, but she must have subletted it. And then I went to Miami. I flew there. I basically rocked up with like a tiny suitcase and I didn't know how long I was going to be there for. And I arrived and all of a sudden, like, you know, when you meet someone and there's a certain energy, like there's an excitement, you're getting to know people, you're quite good friends, and you're like, it's a really even playing field of like, you're excited to learn more about each other and you riff off each other's energy and things like that. And I think when I arrived, he had this, and this guy was...
Can we give Miami dude a name?
Yeah, Raul. He wasn't a Raul at all. But let's just say, actually we won't do Raul. Let's say Ted.
Yeah.
That's more his vibe.
All right.
Ted is a mid-30s, round, not big guy, but like very rounded. Is probably a bit more New York than he is Miami.
Handsome? Ish
in a Luxembourg kind of way.
Okay.
Like, I don't know, is that handsome? Some people. Really, like, I genuinely think he is quite troubled and has a very unrealistic expectation on life. But the minute that I saw him in Miami after he'd flown me there and said that I can stay with him, and I had money, like I wasn't just like destitute and flying to a different country and going, cool.
Yeah.
I had money saved and I was like, whatever happens, happens. And I just remember his attitude being like, he suddenly had this like swagger and it was very performative. Like it was like someone who had learned how to walk like that from a film.
But he didn't have this swagger when you previously met him?
No. He was a lot more humble, a lot more generic, not generic, but like straightforward, everyday kind of you and I talking and socializing. And then this time he had this kind of like, hello, I am Pablo. And I'm like, but you're not Pablo, you're Ted.
Yeah. Do you think because he flew you there that he felt like he
100%.
had? Is that where the vibe came from?
Retrospectively, that is exactly what it happened.
The entitlement. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember I was tired. Like you fly to Miami, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And he was like, we're going to go to the Standard. He doesn't talk like that, but I want you to like get the vibe that this guy's like, I am going to take you to the Standard Hotel.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, cool. I'm hungry. I just want steak. And he's like, I will get you the best steak.
Yeah.
I'm like, cool. So we go to the Standard.
Well, at least he didn't just whip out his dick straight away.
And I like, and if he did, I would have been like, oh, I've misread this, which I had.
Yeah. But I bet there's a lot of dudes that have flown, young, attractive men and women to somewhere, and as soon as they get there, like, all right, well, get to work,
100p.
Like, this is a transaction, motherfucker.
And I think there was a couple of things that I was young, so I was like 22, 23, really naive. I'd met this guy as a very like casual. So going back to meeting him on Grindr and getting the drugs, it wasn't sexual then. He was actually really lovely, and he was like, actually, I don't really like hooking up. I'll happily get you. And it was exactly as it was a drug connection essentially, and that was fine. And so I kind of felt safe in making this decision, in the sense that I was like, look, I don't think he is a predator. Yeah. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone. And I was like, oh, it could actually just be fun to hang out. And I think I said a couple of times, I was like, I'd explain the whole situation. I've just broken up with Felix. He knew about Felix when like I was first in Miami, and he was like, yeah, cool. And I was like, look, I'm a little bit emotionally broken. That also like clouds any of your like reality. Yeah. So I'm just looking for a way out. And then I arrive, and this guy's like all of a sudden different and trying to be really like cool and like a Lothario. And I was like, all right. And the reason I liked him was all of the opposite things. Yeah. Like he wasn't cool. He was normal. He was excited about things. He was passionate about talking about stuff. But all of a sudden, this guy that I was like walking into was Raul and not Ted. Yeah. But it was like Ted dressing as like a spirit Halloween version of Raul. Right.
Just putting on this big boy persona. Yeah. That was just.
Yeah. And like.
Did it wear off? Did he stay like that?
Well, this is the thing, is that like, so I had my own room, which was great. And I had the worst jet lag for 2 weeks. So I was like sleeping all through the day and then staying awake at night.
This is his place. Mm-hmm. Big place?
In Miami. So it's a block of 4. Gloria Estefan is the landlord. Okay. Do you know Gloria Estefan?
The musician?
Yeah. Yeah. So Gloria Estefan rocks up one day to collect rent, and she's like, hello, I'm Gloria. And you're like, what the fuck? Yeah. She doesn't look like what you expect Gloria Estefan, because she's old now and collecting rent. Yeah. But it's a block of 4. He, I'm not going to say his profession, but he had taken the top left, top right was his, and the bottom right was his work. So he used the bottom right as his like office for like his business. And there was a couple of people he worked with there. And then the top floor was the apartment.
Okay. So he's not loaded, but he's comfortable.
Yeah. And like came from family money. From what I can understand, there was like family money. We talked about the family and the connections to Sydney. I think the dad was like Australian. They sailed in yachts around the world. It was a little bit like homeschool vibe. But because we're traveling the world. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm kind of like relaxing into this place. It's a cool place. It's really well connected. It's right in South Beach. So it's amazing location. I get a gym membership at Equinox. I'm spending a lot of time at the beach.
Are you hanging out with Ted every day, or what's?
Ted's working.
Okay.
But Ted had this thing where, because I was sleeping a lot during the day, I wouldn't really notice it. But when the jet lag started like wearing off, I'd wake up early, and Miami's fucking hot in like summer, like June, July. Miami is not pleasant. And Ted was a sweater, And Ted used to play tennis or squash in the morning and come home. And I remember this one morning where all he wanted to do was brag about how good a tennis player or squash player, whatever the fuck he was. And he was saturating this fucking white polo shirt. And it was just like watching a 65-year-old man like who has not put any effort in except sitting on the beach and getting tanned, and it's like leather baggy, being all like, I'm not too bad for a 60-year-old, eh? And you're like, you are. Like, you are awful.
And didn't you say you was 30?
35.
Yeah.
And like, I'm never going to shame someone for how they look or anything like that. But when you start like baiting for attention, and if you start like being a little bit like deluded and he was like, oh, and he'd take his shirt off. And I'm pretty sure that this was all part of the plan to woo me.
All this bravado.
All of it. And this is just me, like, this is the worst podcast. At first it's really open and honest about like queer life and coming out. And now I'm just like rinsing a dude.
No, I'm here for it.
Which is the other part of gay life. Like open, honest, vulnerable. The other part is like reading someone.
Bitching about people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Burn book is open.
Yeah, fuck Ted.
Fuck Ted. And look, Ted was a really nice, genuine guy. I think Ted had very bizarre expectations on what he was entitled to, and what his realities of getting that were in regards to relationships. And I think that this happens everywhere. Ted is not the only person that's ever experienced this. It's very much a situation of, if you think that you can be, everyone has a type. And if you want to sit there and go for a type, you need to also understand that there will be some people who love a 35. If you're a 23-year-old who's in shape and doing all this, there will be some people, there will be those guys that love an older guy who doesn't really look after himself, but wears a lot of designer clothing and has this performative exterior of like, I'm a rich dude and I'm going to spoil you.
Yeah.
That's someone's type, 100%. But when
just wasn't yours.
Yeah, and when you try and force someone into that, or like not blindsiding them, because probably I should have had a bit more eyes open to the situation. But when you start like trying to get people's attention through an inauthentic way, I think it never works out. Like you are all of a sudden catfishing someone into like a situation where they're like, you know what, I was never going to date you.
Yeah, but if there's a situation where you're living with him, right? And
in a separate room.
But you weren't paying for any rent or anything like that.
No.
Right? Then you got to be like, okay, what's the fine print here? You
Totally.
know? And I mean, that's as much on, that's more on him that he needed to be upfront with his communication about like what's his vision for what this looks like, right?
And I very quickly learnt that, and I like, look, I'd buy food, I'd do all stuff, but he often would refuse. So I went to get a gym membership at like just a really shitty gym, and he was like, no, I'll get you a gym membership at Equinox. And I was like, okay, cool. That's really kind of you. He's like, oh, I can get a free one with the pass system that I've got. So you're a 23-year-old who arrived in Miami, you have no fucking idea. And you're like, yeah, well, if you can get a free one, I'll definitely use that.
Yeah.
He didn't get a free one, he bought one, but I found that out later. And more things like this happened where I remember there was one fight night, and I know you love a fight night. And in Miami, when there's a fight night, everyone in Miami is focused on this fucking fight night.
Yeah.
Everything, like hotels, bars, restaurants, and it is insane because people travel to Miami solely to see this fucking fight night. So he decided to have a introduce Brandon party, a soft launch, a hard launch. It was a very hard launch. And like we'd been talking about things like bars and
introduce you as what? Like,
well, and at this stage,
housemate, boyfriend,
yeah.
what's going on?
And I like at this stage I wasn't really too sure. Like we'd had chats and he was really open to the idea. He was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, look, I'd really love to open my own bar. He's like, do you have any concepts? And we'd talk about things and he'd be like, oh my God. He's like, look, I could hook you up with this person, if you really want to make a go of it. He was actually a really nice guy to talk to independently of him wanting to woo me into a relationship.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like, he definitely didn't do the whole, I'm paying for everything, now suck my dick. It was very much I'm putting you in a situation or a habitat, and I'm going to, it's like what they do at zoos. They put two animals together, and one showcases its abilities, and they just fucking hope the other one just roots it so they can save a white leopard or something.
Yeah.
Ted was not a white leopard.
Yeah.
But this idea that you, in the hopes that because of the situational thing, I would suddenly be attracted, or I'd notice Ted.
Well, I mean, it's kind of honourable, isn't it? That he wanted
I
to.
think so,
He wanted to kind of win you over in the right way.
And
but
that's why I'm like, there's a little bit of pity for Ted, and there's like a whole heap of stupidity where I'm like, this is one of the worst decisions I've made in my life. As an adult, I'm like, look, I learned a lot, but as an adult, I would never do this again. I'd be like, all right, but let's lay the rules out. We're like, it's sex for like transactions.
Have you seen the cost of accommodation in Miami these days?
Oh,
I'll take that deal.
Yeah.
Have you got his number still?
Absolutely, I do. But essentially, we'd have these amazing chats, and it was like I was able to find a life, and I was discovering myself again, and I was learning to. America's also really good at encouraging self-worth. And when you've just been like destroyed, and you feel like you've been destroyed by someone who made you feel like you're wanted after coming out and living in a city that didn't want you. Like I felt very alone and isolated in Sydney up until I met Felix. Yeah. And I didn't feel like my type was here. I didn't feel like I was anyone's type. There was a lot of like insecurities and self-doubt and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of it for me was all of a sudden I was in America and people were noticing me. And that was a great feeling. Like, it's a really, really good feeling to all of a sudden be wanted. So all of these options that Ted was talking about, I was like, all right, like this could be a thing. This could be my new life. I could do this. And then it was like all of a sudden it would change. So we'd have these really amazing real talks, and he was the dude that I met when we first came to Miami. Mm-hmm. And then he'd turn. So this event, all of a sudden he was like preparing this event. So I think he went into like the headspace. He also, another kind of like trigger for me now is he used to play Time of the Season all the time. And it's by the Zombies. And the song is, What's Your Name? Who's Your Daddy? And he used to just play it all the time on repeat. And I was like, this is a really sexy song. And now I'm like, oh my God. He was like, do you like this? I'm like,
are you listening to the lyrics?
Yeah. What do you think of the lyrics? And I'm like, cool song. And it is a cool song. Anyway, we were organizing this party, and this was where I started like really just resenting him. We went to this thing, and I was like, okay, cool. And he was like, okay, what liquor do you want? And I was like, well, it's your party. You're paying for it. You just get the liquor. And he was like, no. You won the bar, you're the hospitality guy, you tell me what kind of drinks you want to make, and like spun this whole thing of like, pick whatever you like. It's the fucking Pretty Woman moment. It's like, whatever you want, it's yours kind of thing. And I was like in the liquor shop going, yeah, like let's do this, this and this. And I remember going, I really like this vodka. And him basically just picking up a fucking flagon of Tito's, like a 4-liter flagon, and being like, well, we're getting Tito's. And I was like, why ask?
Yeah.
I was like, why sit there and like go through the fucking performative action of saying the choice is yours, and then going, we're actually just going to get Tito's.
We're going to get the discount.
Yeah.
Bulk buy vodka.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's fine. Like, cool. Like, we're going to do it, but don't pretend. Anyway, the party happens, and this is where like the wheels on the cart like really start coming off for him. All these people come, and I would expect when you invite people over on a fight night in Miami and people come, and he's maybe throwing this together in a couple of days. These are your ride or dies. These are the people that are like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm not doing anything for the fight. I'm going to come over. Let's have a bit of a party.
Yeah.
The first guy arrives, and he's this Italian guy, and I'm like, oh, hey. And he like hated me.
Instantly.
Yeah. And I was like, mm-hmm. And
it's a bit harsh.
The guy that he came in with was like, hello. And I was like, hi. And he goes, I think I need to talk to you for a second. And I was like, okay. He's like, I am, and let's just call him Eduardo. the first guy who hated me. He's like, I am Eduardo's boyfriend. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, what's up? And he goes, okay, so Ted and Eduardo used to be together. And I was like, all right. And he goes, Eduardo works with Ted downstairs. And I was like, all right. And he goes, I am Eduardo's boyfriend. And I was like, yep, I get it. And at this stage, my anxiety's kicking. I'm like, what the fuck's happening? And he goes, Ted brought Eduardo here like he brought you here. And I was like, what? And he goes, he fell in love with Eduardo and he brought him here and he basically promised him the world, gave him a job. And now Eduardo was like, I want to go home. I want to go back to my boyfriend. So then he brought me here and that's why we were both here. And now we talk in Italian and Ted does not like that and he's angry. But we're noticing that Ted is focusing all his attention on you and Eduardo doesn't like that because we're now starting to miss out on opportunities.
What a mess.
And I'm like, oh my fucking Christ. Like, what is this? So essentially,
that's a lot to take in.
Really quickly.
Yeah.
Like I'm crammed in a toilet and this guy's like, I need to fill you in on everything.
And you're drinking, you're like at a party.
At this
like,
stage,
wow,
yeah. And I'm like, all right, cool. I'm like, this guy's boyfriend fucking hates me because he feels like, and I'm still naive. I'm like, this guy thinks I'm the new Eduardo. And I'm like, definitely not. Anyway, so then I go out to Ted. I'm like, what the fuck? And I explain the story and he goes, oh no, that's crazy. He's just jealous because he really wants to be my boyfriend. I was like, he has a boyfriend and none of that really aligns.
Yeah.
And he's made a couple of comments throughout the week about Eduardo talking behind his back and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, the next person comes in and there's all these like randoms come in who don't ever feel comfortable being there.
It's also weird when the first two people you invite over to your party, people that immediately talk smack about you.
Yeah. 100%. And then more people start arriving. And the more people arrive, the more uncomfortable everyone is. And no one really knows each other. And then I recognize a guy from Soho Beach House. And I'm like, hey, man, what are you doing here? Like, I didn't know you were friends with Ted. And he goes, oh, I'm kind of not. It was Ted just kind of like invites me to a whole heap of these things all the time. And tonight all my friends were going to a fight night, so I thought, fuck it. I'll just have free booze and drugs at Ted's house. I was like, okay. And then, so that happens, more people arrive, more people.
Like poor Ted doesn't have any real friends.
Yeah. And the more I realized that, the more I was like, fuck me, man. And I don't know whether it was the fact that I suddenly realized my entire existence in Miami was I was being shown off. And then he started like rubbing my back. And this is the first time Ted had been sexual or overt. And he started like slapping my ass. And I remember at one stage I made a tequila and soda and I brought it over and Ted was drinking fucking vodka, his vodka and soda.
The bulk buy big bottle.
The fucking Tito's. I still remember it too. Like that fucking brown label. I look at it and I'm always like, Ted. But I was sitting there talking to a whole heap of people and I'd kind of realized and I was like, fuck, I feel like a fucking fool. I've been putting in I put myself in a situation where I haven't read the room and I'm now at a point where everyone thinks I'm this fucking houseboy and everyone is already in on the joke of Ted. And now I'm part of the joke.
I mean, you are a houseboy just without the sex at that stage, right?
Well, now Ted's ramping that up. Yeah. Like now there's an audience, the show is on. Like he's grabbing my ass. We went and bought like because I didn't bring swimmers. So Ted was like, I'll buy you some swimmers. So he went to we went to the main district in Miami and I was like, oh, I really like these swimmers. And he was like, And he was he's like, no, we'll go to this place. And then he bought me this pair, which were kind of the same, but like.
But you had your own money, right? Why didn't you just buy your own fucking swimmers?
Because he didn't let me take my wallet.
Okay.
So he used to put my wallet in a safe.
Man.
Yeah.
Fuck that.
The more and more I clocked it, the more I was like, fuck me, man. Like this is so.
It sounds like, this scenario that it must have been part of you that was just. You could see the signs, but just ignore them for one reason or another.
Until this party. Yeah. And then the classic point was, at one stage he tells me to put the swimmers on and show them off to all of his friends. And these guys are like, don't do that.
Totally unnecessary.
Yeah, please don't do that. Like,
it's going to ruin the party.
Yeah, we're kind of just here for the guac.
I know we're gay. I know you're hot, but like, it's not the vibe of the party.
And a lot of them just weren't. Like, they were just, it was a collection of random people. The more and more I realized it was like, oh, I've done a contracting job for Ted, and I'm in town, and everyone else is doing stuff, and like essentially it was like no one else had anywhere to go, so they're all at Ted's.
And then he wanted to chase you around in your Speedos.
And he's like touching my butt, and like he's sitting there and he's saying stuff. He's like, oh yeah, you know, like he puts on a show in the shower, and I'm like, bitch, I don't. And then like there was a couple of times where he walked into the shower while I was showering, and he was like, oh sorry, I'm just getting something. So the more I'm like, fuck, you played me, bro. And then he does this thing, which I like, that this is the point that I like went, this is fucked up. I'm holding my tequila soda and talking to a group of people, and Ted like has this like suddenly slender man hand that reaches in, grabs my drink, drinks it, and then just puts it back in my hand as like
the empty cup.
No, like just takes a mouthful and then puts it back in my hand. I'm so stunned that the hand's still there, ready to hold it, and I'm like, this is classic like dominant trying to like showcase ownership thing.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at that glass, I'm like, I'm never going to drink from that again. And that was the point where I was like, I need to get out. And I remember like...
Well, that's actually COVID safe these days.
Yeah.
To not share drinks.
Yeah.
But
well ahead.
Were you not wanting to like... I would have wanted to pull the dude aside and be like, dude, like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, let's just nip this in the bud straight away.
That's essentially what happened. So I like sat and festered throughout the rest of the party. And then I think I kind of like was just really angry. Again, this maybe reflects badly on me, but I'm like, I've been dumb, I've been naive, and then I found out that like I actually can't trust dudes who I've misread the situation, and I've like all of it's just come together. I'm like, fuck, I'm done. Survival instinct is there. Everyone leaves, and then he basically sits there and he's like, all right, come into bed, baby. And I was like, we need to stop. I was like, this is not what I thought it was, and maybe I've read this wrong, but like this is not it. Like, and I feel like everything's been fine up until this one party, and now it's very obvious that I'm suddenly your houseboy. We have a bit of a fight. I storm out. I then go to like fucking some bar. Actually, it's so hot in Miami, and Miami's fucking weird. So I'm angry. I'm walking the streets. It's like 1 a.m, and like the amount of people that were just sitting on their balconies jerking off, or like fucking, or like doing whatever. It's wild. Like It was just, and I was just like, this city is so charged with sex and sexuality. Miami's also a city of 3 nights. So I feel like it's always a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night.
Yep.
And it's just those 3 nights on repeat. So you're just consistently part of this.
Groundhog Day party.
Yeah. Of like, people are going out for their like hens party, bucks party, whatever it is. And so there was just this like cacophony of noise and transactional interactions everywhere. And all of a sudden I just realized that I was like in this place where I was like, fuck. I've like made all these mistakes.
I've been there myself, and I found like everyone there seems like they're just trying to play you out of your money.
Everyone's
like,
on the
everyone's got some kind of scam that they're running, right? No one is genuine.
Yeah.
And
for a little boy from Australia who's just like gone through a bit of a heartbreak, and you arrive there and you're just like, who do I trust? How do I get out of this situation?
You're in the wrong fucking city for trust. Don't go to Miami building trust. Yeah.
No. So, and I was really lucky. I went to this pub, a bar, and I had a chat, and there was this English guy, and we had that exact same chat. And he was like, look, to be honest, I'm just using this place as a residence because it's a good tax haven, but I live in New York. Yeah.
That's funny.
So essentially, he smuggled me out, and
great for your taxes, though.
Yeah. And I remember my sister was coming to visit, and she was like, "I'm going to be in New York, but I'll come and visit you in Miami." And this was like in between the whole, I'm about to liberate myself, and so I had this whole thing planned. And I basically just one day when he went to work, just packed up all my shit and left and went to this guy's place. He was in New York. I stayed there for a couple of days. And then I bought myself a flight to New York. And then a friend of mine that I'd worked with in Australia had basically said there was a job going that I could apply for that he'd recommended me for, because I think I'd said something on Facebook. And I got this job, and I lived and worked in New York for a year.
Is it the last you saw or heard of Ted?
Ted obviously reached out because I'd abandoned him.
Where the fuck you gone?
Yeah. And like, I had to sit there and say, I was like, look, I'm just not comfortable being there anymore. I'm not comfortable with you. I was fine to be friends, but I feel like you've taken advantage of...
Was he angry, heartbroken?
To be honest, it felt as though it was just happening again. And he was like, well, you know, I'm disappointed. And I was like, there was no emotion. It was like, oh, well, that's happened again. I need to like go through the process again to find my next houseboy.
Yeah. He sounds like a very odd dude.
He was very odd. And look, lovely in his own way, but I feel like it's that lacking of authenticity that all of a sudden I was just so aware of and so like disgusted by. And like, look, I think it's one of those things that has really taught me to interact now. I hate inauthenticity. I hate the idea of like being performative, because I was like, if I can feel that with Ted, anyone can feel that when you just fake it. And like being in Miami and then going to New York was a bit more real, but everyone is like, yeah, bro, like, let's do it. Like, and everything's just a promise. And I hated it.
Given that experience, would you say to people, if someone offers you free accommodation, check the terms and conditions?
For sure. Look, and there's points now where I'm like, fuck, if I had that offer now, I'd be like, are we fucking? Do I like, do you have
what
to
are your
suck my
expectations
dick?
here? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be like, just let me know, because I'm down.
You just want the transparency just so you can make up your mind. But yeah.
Yeah.
See, these are things that you probably could have figured out in your own head if you had have stopped to think about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess you were just so caught up in just getting the fuck out of Sydney after the Felix situation that just all these things happen suddenly, and you're just happy to be out of one bad situation that you haven't really paused to think about the new one you've put yourself in.
But look, and this isn't to like, I think what I did essentially was wrong for not only myself, but also for Ted. It's unfair to put either of us in those situations, but it happened and I learned a lot from it.
I think you both failed each other by just not having the proper conversations that you needed. Right?
Totally. But I think one of the things that I find really fascinating is that those conversations, those situations happen a lot because there are people who don't acknowledge it. And there are people who will take advantage of Ted and like put on that inauthentic smile, and they probably would have had sex with Ted and they would have done that. And like, does that really help Ted in the end? Does having a boy or girl who does everything that you want and is probably just very much using you, which I know I've got friends that have got houseboys and sugar babies and things like that. And I know, like I've met their sugar babies inadvertently and they don't know. And they will just be like, oh my God, this guy, and I just do this. And like, they're playing him. But also...
But I mean, I would imagine that most people will be savvy enough to know they're getting played as well.
I don't think so.
No?
And I think that this is the thing, and this is what I learned about Ted, is that I could never get angry at him because in the end, he's a lonely guy and I was a lonely guy.
Yeah.
And we both did what we needed to do in order to not feel lonely and to feel wanted and validated. And I think, like I did, you put blinders on and you just start going, yeah, sure.
But if I was on a sugar baby website looking for someone, I wouldn't imagine that I'm going to find a genuine connection.
No, absolutely
there, right?
not. But like, or do you? Do you sometimes sit there and think like,
I would think it's purely transactional, but you're right. There's like these rich businessmen that are, never had any real personal relationships.
And they think it's easy and then they get into it. But you and I have both had relationships, I know we both have, where you've been the breadwinner and you've given probably more, and it's perhaps been started to be taken for granted, and the original relationship has now just transcended into, what do I get from it?
You give and it's never enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like in that sense, when I've done that, it's because I love my partner and I want to make them happy, and I have the capacity to give, and the capacity to, like, I paid for someone's life for a year, and totally. you go on, and like I find I'm in that, and sometimes you can be taken advantage for that. And I think because of my own interactions with Ted, I never sit there and go, fuck, like I hate that. I'm like, fuck, I understand Ted now.
Yeah. So do you think that kind of experience has had longer lasting benefits for you, just in terms of, I guess, being able to have transparency or open conversations with people?
Yeah, I think it definitely it matures you. I think you're in a country that you don't really know anything, and all of a sudden the support network and stability crumbles around you. Like it genuinely feels like you were in a house and the simulation drops and all of a sudden you're like, fuck, like what do I do?
Yeah.
And yeah, I had money. That's how I was able to like move to New York, and I was like, fuck, okay, there's that contingency. But you're never ready to, I didn't have the money to start a new life in Miami all of a sudden and instantly. Like, and I didn't even have the fucking visa to do it.
Yeah.
So it definitely forces you to take account of your maturity, how you work in situations, how you like live and survive and all of that stuff. But it also just made me really aware. Like the more I thought about it and the more that I like processed that houseboy situation, the more I was able to like clock into the thought process of both parties and go, all right, I don't think Ted's a creep, but I do understand where he comes from.
Yeah.
And I now like look at that moving into relationships and understanding other people's point of view, because it is a very raw thing. Like sex is so raw. And whenever sex or intimacy, and I think intimacy is probably the big one, like that fear of being alone or forgotten or not validated or touched or craved or wanted, that's so important to people that it can make you do some crazy shit. And so if you're not aware of that, and if you're not aware of like your scope for that, I think you end up just putting yourself in situation after situation like that. And I know people that do that and who don't acknowledge that they're using and abusing, and they find themselves in the center of drama all the time, and you're like, fuck, man.
So something I wanted to ask about. So, I mean, you've got, nearly 100,000 followers on Instagram. You post a lot of photos of you wearing next to nothing. You must get like a lot of DMs from dudes and women, like that must proposition you with all kinds of wild shit.
Yeah.
Right? How do you deal with that?
It's intoxicating. I think.
Sure, it feels nice to have that attention.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of mine. So when I came back from the States, it was 2014.
Yeah.
And then that's when I started going to the gym. That's when I started like being in the Paul Freeman shoots. That's when I started having a bit more physical confidence.
Yeah.
I always had that internal confidence, but I needed the external to match. And I think I did it. I also did that stupid thing where you look at all these boys and you're like, fuck, man, I want to get to that size. And then you get somewhere close and you go, how do you do it? And they're like, well, steroids. And you're like, oh,
yeah, fuck, I was doing it the hard way.
Yeah, fuck, right.
That's why it's taken so goddamn long.
Yeah. And I think I made that decision to go, you know what? I've worked all this way and I've done all this work and I've put all this discipline in. I now know my self-worth and my value. I think if I had done that earlier, if I had been like 16, 17, 18 and had like that Insta fame and I was like at the gym and I was doing all that stuff, when you're an 18-year-old, unless you're having a fucking wank and working at McDonald's, there's not much else going on in your life, right? So you can go to the gym, you can do all this stuff. You're probably living with your parents. You've got very little cares in the world. You're probably studying. So I look at all these like boys and girls on Instagram who are fucking hot, but 17, 18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could have processed the attention then. I don't think that I could have easily gone, some dude's wanting to pay me $100 for my feet pictures or things like that. And I would have gone, fuck yeah. Or like, I get a lot of like, can you send me videos of you jerking off? And I'm like, sometimes I've like gone, tell me about it. Cause I'm like, I want to know what you want.
What?
And then
how much are they offering?
It ranges. Like sometimes people just lowball you and they're like, $20. I'm like,
that's insulting.
Absolutely. Like I know I do it for free, but like, fuck, I'm not sending you. And the idea of like wanting face pictures, and the more savvy you are, the more you realize that not everyone thinks like you. So not everyone has this idea. Like, and that was the TED thing where you go, I obviously realized we both thought about that situation differently. And so going into things like Instagram requests and stuff, you suddenly go, like I know that there's been people that have tried to like get my nudes with my face so that they can do whatever. And like it's compromising nudes.
What do you mean by do whatever?
Well, like not everyone wants to jerk off over you. Sometimes people want to shame you. They want to publicly post them on social media. They want to make money from it. They want to use it to put on an OnlyFans, and they want to make their own money, or they want to do it at the cost of your reputation or humility or things like that. Because if you're not on OnlyFans yourself and you're doing all this stuff, you probably haven't processed the idea of what it's like for people to be like, yeah, I've seen you jerk off, or I've seen your dick, or I've seen your pussy. So in that sense, having that ability taken away from you by someone else who's conned you out of nudes and have now posted all over the internet for their own gain or their own sick perversion, I think that's a really difficult lesson to learn. And I think it's happening more and more these days. And like there's a lot of cybercrime stuff, and there's a lot of like revenge porn legislation that's happening. But like the stories you hear about people who are sending wild, there's many Twitters that have been established, which is dudes catfishing straight young guys into sending nude pictures and things like that. And then they post it as like, I baited this guy, like straight baits, or there's even like gay baits and things like that. And you go, there's someone who's genuinely getting off on the idea of baiting you, pretending to be someone else, and then posting it on the internet going, this is my score. And in that sense, that's terrifying.
I imagine that's quite easy though. If a guy has fake profile pictures of a girl, matches with a guy, and says, send me a picture of your dick, I imagine that's quite easy to get out of a lot of blokes.
100%.
I mean, to be fair, some blokes are just sending it without the request.
Absolutely.
Right?
Just fucking ask any girl that he's possibly spoken to on Tinder. But I think like that's the thing, is that like that's what it's taught me, is that going through that very real life experience made me realize a whole heap of things that have better allowed me to better formulate my thought process in other things, and made me become ready for a multitude of other interactions. So whether it's digital, where it's really real life, it now makes me very conscious of how I make myself available.
Yeah.
I very much don't jump into a situation where I'm like, yeah, cool, I'm just a fucking party good time guy. I'm very aware of like what the stakes are and what the expectation is. And that often seems like I'm fucking boring, but I've been in the situation before where I've been the good time guy and I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
For some people they do, but not for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you throw yourself into the deep end and haven't communicated enough about what's the situation going to look like, then suddenly you're like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
I didn't sign up for this.
And I think, like, look, it's helped me in life because not only now am I able to sit there and go, great, I have a very strong idea of what I want and who I want to do that with and how I want to see my life going. I find myself in situations where I can read a situation a whole heap better, and I'm more aware of the gamut of human emotions and wants and desires. So I can often read, like, I'm not a fucking mind reader by anything, but like I've been able to mitigate a lot of risks and a lot of failures and a lot of like issues because I have the ability to go, this is different to how I see it.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of friends who fall trapped to the idea of just like blind optimism.
Yeah.
And I think that more people should have blind optimism. It's just a shame that not everyone has the same blind optimism of good intentions.
Well, I think there's blind optimism in general, like believing in love and the best in people. And there's blind optimism in like, oh, I'm just going to meet this dude at this party. We've only been chatting for an hour. I'm just going straight over to his place and thinking like, that it's going to be
totally
a great situation.
And that's a great point because I don't feel like anyone prepares you for that. So while I would love to say you should be able to have blind optimism to go, fuck yeah, we've been chatting, I'm gonna go to this dude's house, whether you're a guy or a girl, you should be able to go there and understand and have a whole heap of understanding where you make that decision and therefore have the resulting ability to deal with that situation, right? Like the amount of girlfriends I know that are like, that get into that situation, then realize that it's not their thing, but they've never been taught that like not every boy has your best intentions at heart. And the worst part is they haven't been taught any methods to get out of it either.
Yep. Like I've matched with girls on Tinder and talked to them for like an hour, and they've invited me straight over to their house, and I'm like, that's psycho behavior, because like, how do you know that the person that's going to come over isn't going to be a total weirdo, right?
That's
like,
crazy.
Wouldn't you want to go and just meet at a bar for a few drinks and just see if there's a connection and a vibe?
Look, you are talking to someone who uses Grindr, so yes, I do understand elements of that. But I speak from.
But you're also like a big dude.
I'm a 6'3" white dude.
You're a big dude. You yeah, yourself, right?
Yeah,
some petite girl asking some big stranger over seems like just a possible recipe for disaster.
Totally.
You know.
Totally. And I think as well, there's a whole heap of concerns of these days where for both parties, where in the moment we all know that we get horny, we think we have the ability to be as dirty or as clean or anything that we want, and we go into situations with this blind optimism of like, yeah, I want to be fucking choked out, and I want to be spat in the eye, and I want to like all of these things, like whatever it is. I actually have a situation in mind that a friend told me about, and you rock up. And
that sounded super specific.
Yeah, oddly specific story.
Yeah.
And you rock up and that happens, and one party realizes it's very much not what they're into. But like the other party has been enamored and emboldened, and they're fully getting into it because maybe that's what they're into.
Yeah.
And then you're trapped in a situation, and then you leave and you have post-cum regret, or you just have regret, and you find yourself in this situation where you're like, holy shit, like, how did I get it so wrong? And I think that that's a really important part. And I think there should be more. One, we should have more confidence to talk about sex.
Yeah.
Like I know that my mother will hate the fact that I'm talking about the idea that I was possibly a houseboy. But fuck, man, if someone listening to this realizes that if you talk about things, it opens a conversation. You have the ability to start having a positive conversation about sex and how we deal with it. Who's to say that like there's a group of girls that should talk to their friends about really rough sex, and one girl goes, that's actually not for me. I don't think I can deal with that. And so therefore that girl doesn't put herself in a situation where she thinks it could just be like kissing and touching. No, yeah. Am I rambling?
No, I also think just for your mum's sake, you're a houseboy in name only, not in action, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like I didn't end up chained to like a Fritzl's basement or something.
But yeah, I mean, I think whether that's in the communication before people meet up or when they do meet up, I mean, it absolutely is important for people to be communicating their preferences and what are the kind of their boundaries.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's a recipe for disaster.
And just going back on that idea of like, I think we need to stop. I recently deleted Twitter because that's where I was using for porn.
You're using Twitter for you're watching porn on Twitter.
You know how Tumblr got destroyed?
No, I don't know anything about this stuff.
So Tumblr used to be where you can go to like XTube and things like that, but I often find it's the same people. You never get exactly the kind of headfucky shit that you want. So sometimes you want some really
twisted
bespoke like narrative.
All right.
And like Tumblr and Twitter like can create these communities where they source a whole heap of different stuff and present it in like a kink or a fetish or style, and that probably appeals to you more. And it's a more like lifestyle porn channel.
On Twitter? Wow.
Yeah.
I would have had no idea.
Huge. Because Twitter's uncensored. So
yeah,
you
okay.
but it's only 2 minutes 20, but you don't really need it for more than that.
I've just been posting dumb comedy tweets. I've got like 20 followers.
People are like, get your dick out.
I'm getting one like and, get your cock out. Where's the videos?
Yeah. Make a joke while you're jerking off.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's all there. Like it's you can see it's the bedrock for like the next trending fetish. So like you notice that there's a whole heap of cuckolding stuff. There's a whole heap of like, there's weird race play communities. After I've deleted Twitter, the conversations I've had with friends who are like, oh bro, and they open up this whole Pandora's box of like the shit they found on like Twitter. And you're like, is this the dark web? And they're like, no, it's a short messaging posting app that Hamo uses to post jokes.
Fucking hell.
Yeah.
So that you say you had to delete Twitter.
Because the more I look at porn, the more I isolate myself away from the reality. And I think the more that we throw ourselves into porn, the more porn has to do to stimulate and sell porn, right?
Yeah.
So long gone are the days where you can be like, oh no, he fell on me and we're like heavy petting and caressing. Now it's like, I don't want to repeat it, but some of the shit that I've watched, I'm like.
Also, OnlyFans has killed,
Yeah.
you know, the storylines we used to have. There used to be great, great dialogue in these kind of things.
The narrative that was someone's job. OnlyFans ruined writers' jobs.
I think so.
Maybe
also,
they're not good writers, but that was a starting point.
I don't know about it, man, because like I think there's all these like I don't know lonely dudes out there that are thinking like instead of bettering themselves to go and try and pick up chicks, they're like. Debbie, my barista, is on OnlyFans. I can pay like $5 and watch and watch her.
And watch her fucking,
and I can wank at home.
Yeah.
Like, why would I bother to better myself when I can just do that?
100%.
Right? And so, yeah, I don't know where we're going with this bit, but it just seemed like porn is frying everyone's brains a little bit.
But it's all like I think it also puts in some like really like. I've had to reflect on a whole heap of things where I'm like, fuck, man, do I stay that hard? Do I do I do that? Like, why are all these guys always hard? I'm like, it's because they're taking a photo whenever they're hard. Like,
and aren't they always on like pills or porn stars are all
who
on?
knows? It's the steroid thing. You're just like, oh, fuck, man, they're just so, and then you question it. And then exactly the same thing. You find you don't go out to bars and meet people because you're like, fuck it, there's hotter people on my computer and I don't have to talk to them and I don't have to engage. And I think that that's the thing that I really kind of miss in the sense of now that I'm comfortable with myself and happy, I would love to go to a bar and I'd love to meet people that aren't just about taking photos. Like Halloween's coming up and you get the idea that people are dressing to be really slutty and sexy and take Instagram photos. But the reality is they're not able to either commit to that or they don't want to commit to that. And so you've kind of just got this whole thing where everything's built around digital perception and no one's... This is a far cry from following a child into a mountain at Disneyland.
Halloween used to be about the scares. Now it's all about dressing up slutty.
Yeah. And you just find yourself in a position where you kind of just don't connect with people anymore because it's all about selling something. Either you're selling ad space for likes or whatever it is. Like it's... Yeah, I don't know. Look, to bring it all back, I think those journeys that I went on really early before the OnlyFans period and before Twitter and before a whole heap of this stuff, I realized that I was like, this is not my world. Yeah. I can't be a houseboy. I can't do a whole heap of this stuff. So
do you like the version of yourself that you are now?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. I love it. I love the fact that I can talk about this stuff and I'm really open with it and I can then go on podcasts, but then also talk to the man. Like there is that reality, which
must be cool, man.
Yeah, you have to. Like, yeah, but it should be that way for everyone. Like, I look at your story and like the ability for you to kind of go, fuck, like this happened. I'm now making something of it, and I connected with these people, and I can tell these stories, and I can do this. That's like a freedom that a lot of people don't have because they're so stifled by worry and stress and insecurity, I guess.
Totally. Well, when I was a criminal, I mean, like I couldn't really do a podcast like this and out myself, right?
That is also a benefit, I guess.
It was only once everything had kind of fallen apart that I was like, well, where do I go from here?
I don't know. You had that short film about
I'll release that one day.
That was good.
Yeah, thank you.
That was really good.
So you've got a bar that you own in King's Cross or Potts Point called Dulcie's.
Yeah.
Cocktail bar that only houses Australian spirits. Is that right? And then you got a new project at the moment that you're working on.
Yeah, we're opening a bar in the city, which is exciting. Yeah, like now
has it got a name?
Stirred.
Stirred.
Everything is stirred down.
When's that opening?
Hopefully by December.
Great. Okay, so not long.
No, not long at all.
That's exciting.
Yeah, but it's good. Like it's fairly boring as opposed to my previous life, but. Yeah, it's... I
don't think it's boring to own bars. That sounds like some cool shit.
You should own one. And then you'll
Well, famously, I did own a pizza restaurant in King's Cross. Unfortunately, due to COVID and my incarceration, it went under. But we live and we learn. Sorry?
Do you still have the pizza oven?
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah, I think we're trying to get rid of it. So if anyone wants to buy a pizza oven, DM me. All right, we are out of time. Brandon, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
It's been great. All the best with the opening of Stirred. I will come and check it out soon.
Thank you. I can't wait to hear more.
Stay tuned. All right, we're out.
Shit's gone sideways.